Chapter 7 takes us from California's transition from an unstable and messed up province of Mexico to an unstable and messed up territory of the United States. It also sets us up for the next big and arguably most important event in California's history. In Chapter 6, we saw how Americans slowly became a significant presence in California, starting with the traders and the trappers, and eventually working up to merchants, landowners, and finally settlers that arrived in long wagon trains. California was already unstable with a long succession of governors, influential families that vied for power, and a southern half of the territory that just didn't get along well with the north. This was a time in the history of the United States when manifest destiny was a central part of American politics. Manifest destiny was a belief, drive, I'm not sure what to call it, that the United States should spread its borders from sea to shining sea. The United States was in expansion mode and California was on the radar. Andrew Jackson had many reasons to be interested in acquiring the territory. The San Francisco Bay had great economic potential, and the territory's location along the Pacific coast would bring manifest destiny closer to fruition. At this time also, the issue of slavery reared its ugly head and would greatly influence American politics in years to come. Andrew Jackson was the first president to make an offer to the Mexican government for the purchase of California. The deal would place San Francisco Bay south of the proposed border. The offer of $3.5 million was refused. But the siren song of manifest destiny played loudly in the ears of each succeeding American president. Van Buren didn't have 2 pennies to rub together, so it didn't happen under his watch. Things were a little better economically during Tyler's presidency, but his offer didn't appeal to the Mexicans. We Mexicans have always been good bargainers. As an aside, don't you think President Tyler looks a little like Auntie Em from The Wizard of Oz? The dark underbelly of American foreign policy was exposed in September of 1842 with the occurrence of the embarrassing Jones incident. Jones had been instructed to set sail to California and seize Monterey, which was then the capital of the territory, when he heard there was a war between the U.S. and Mexico. Jones landed with 150 Marines and raised the Stars and Stripes only to find out that the rumors of war were only rumors. Jones was forced to leave with his dignity a bit askew. By the time Polk became president, California was ripe for the picking. His decisions were influenced by the belief that the British were interested in acquiring California. With the expulsion of Micheltorena and his troops, the Mexican government lost control of California. By this time, there was enough of an American presence to sway the situation in a favorable direction for American acquisition. In the meantime, the threat of other powers invading California began to materialize. Eugene McNamara, an Irish priest, proposed to the Mexican government that he could bring thousands of Irish colonizers into California and occupy a portion of the land the government would grant them. The Mexicans were favorable to the plan because it would ally them to the British and would boost the population in California by about 12,000 people. The Mexicans went as far as to actually grant the needed land to McNamara. The British had not actually approved the plan, but their interest in California would certainly influence their receptivity to the plan. Polk reacted by making an offer to purchase the territory outright. It was an offer he knew would be rejected. He had Plan B going in the background. Plan B involved Thomas Larkin and the many Americans who by now had settled in California. His job was to use his influence and start getting the locals to begin making noise about the need for American protection. Larkin was good. He got some of his local cronies to help him, and together they really got the ball rolling. Things looked pretty good for a while. Enter John C. Fremont. This guy had issues. He needed to be a hero. He basically came along and put his foot right into Polk's plan for peaceful acquisition. Actually, he already was a hero. With his previous work as an explorer, he had gained considerable notoriety. He wanted to come to California on a military mission and get things moving a little faster than President Polk. He was well connected, but the president really didn't have a part in his plans. He basically came to California with 60 armed men, raised an American flag on Hawks Peak, and declared California an American territory. This didn't go over well with the Mexicans. Colonel Castro took 200 men and drove Fremont and his crew north. It was there that he and a group of Marines, led by Archibald Gillespie, plotted the Bear Flag Revolt. Amid the disarray of the times, rumors of Governor Castro's plan to expel American settlers brought things to a head. This prompted 30 armed men to knock on the door of Colonel Vallejo and demand a surrender. Vallejo really didn't need to be coerced. He was very much in favor of American acquisition. Terms of capitulation were quickly drawn up and agreed to. Unfortunately, William B. Ide and his men committed a critical error. They arrested Vallejo and moved him north to Sutter's Fort, where Fremont, who was now stationed there, had placed him in a cell. The Bear Flag Revolt was raised in Sonoma, but the locals were outraged with the treatment Vallejo had received. The locals were prodded into attacking the Americans, giving Fremont an excuse to launch a defense. After a relatively small amount of bloodshed, it was all over and California was now a free republic. The American flag was raised in Monterey on July 7th by Commodore Sloat. Fremont was an even bigger hero now, but his actions had created a great deal of bitterness between the Americans and the Californios. In the meantime, war with Mexico was brewing. The annexation of Texas by the U.S. brought about disagreement between the two governments over the southern border of the territory. Zachary Taylor took his troops into the disputed area between the Nueces River and the Rio Grande. The ensuing skirmishes led to the declaration of war against Mexico. The war was now on. As the war fired up, Sloat invaded the Bear Republic and raised the American flag, as noted earlier. Governor Pico and Castro packed up and left. The rest of the resistance was taken by Kearny, Stockton, and Fremont. All that remained was the paperwork. This was done in Cahuenga on the 13th of January. The war with Mexico ran its course. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed on February 2nd, 1848, officially ending the war. Mexico was forced to cede about half of its territory. Thus, California became a territory of the United States, and Manifest Destiny came closer to actually happening. Ironically, gold was discovered only 9 days earlier. The gold rush didn't exactly equal the 7 cities of El Dorado, but the wealth that it brought was considerable.